Welcome back to the Sunday to Society podcast for episode number 3. If you haven't gone back and listened to episode 1 and 2 yet, I encourage you to do so. The topic we're going to be discussing today is being content in an uncontent world. We live in a society today where people are discontent at everything, aren't they? Where people's lives are all over social media, showcasing their newest car, their recent house purchase, and maybe even the vacation that they just got back home from. And somebody who's scrolling through social media can see this and instantly become discontent with the house that they live in, or the 6-year-old model of smartphone that they have in their pocket, or maybe it's just a 5-year-old car that's sitting in their driveway. Companies today will also advertise for their newest products. Tech companies will advertise their new phones or computers. Car manufacturers will advertise their newest, latest, and greatest year model for their new car. What is the point? They're trying to get us discontent with the things that we have so that we will go out and buy the newest product. But the question I want to first ask today is, what makes you happy? Does buying something brand new make you happy? Does spending time with family make you happy? What is the thing that makes you happy? Where are you looking for happiness? Some people find happiness in their job, whether that be they work a job that gives them fulfillment and gives them contentment. In fact, most people today work a job that they're not happy at, whether that be the pay or the hours. Maybe their boss is not fun to work for. In fact, most people don't like the job that they are currently working in. But maybe you're one of the people that do find happiness in your job. Some people find happiness in their family. Others do not. Some people enjoy coming home after a long day to be greeted with a spouse or kids or family that they enjoy being around, and they find happiness in that. For others, they don't like to come home at the end of the day because they know that when they get home, it's not going to be filled with happiness. Instead, it's going to be filled with anger, discontentment, or some other type of emotion. Others find happiness in serving other people. This could be at church or some other type of organization. They enjoy making other people's life enjoyable and find happiness from that. But the question I have is, where do you go to find happiness? They call it comfort food for a reason, don't they? Some people eat food when they are searching for happiness. Maybe you have a favorite comfort meal, or your favorite meal just brings you happiness after eating it. For me, my comfort meal is coconut curry chicken. If you get a nice piece of naan bread and some coconut curry chicken, I find happiness in that. It's a comfort meal for me. And maybe for you, you find comfort in some other sort of food from a particular restaurant, or maybe a particular brand of something that you really like, and you find comfort and happiness in that. On the other hand, where do you go when you're upset and angry in order to find happiness? Where do you go to find self-satisfaction? And where do you go to find comfort? What does make you happy? There's a man in the Bible that we read of by the name of Solomon who had everything that he ever would have wanted to have, yet when he comes to the end of his life in the book of Ecclesiastes, he still didn't find happiness, did he? King Solomon, it is suggested that King Solomon had a net worth of $2 trillion in today's money. When you take into account his assets, his trade routes, palace, temple, and other things, you get a net worth of about $2 trillion. It puts King Solomon into some of the most richest people that had ever walked the face of the earth. Remember when God comes to him and asks him what he would like, and Solomon replies with wisdom? Yet that still didn't bring happiness to Solomon, did it? To put $2 trillion into perspective, I want us to think of Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, Elon Musk, the founder of Tesla and other companies, and Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook. These 3 men alone are in the top 1% of the richest people in the world today. All 3 of them are billionaires, and if you were to take their net worth, combine all of their net worth together, you're only then a fourth of the way to what King Solomon's net worth. Now, that's a lot of money, isn't it? Yeah, at the end of the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon says that he still wasn't happy, was he? He didn't find contentment in the things that he had. He talks about in the book of Ecclesiastes all the houses and different things that he had, but at the end of the day, he still didn't find happiness. In fact, when he does come to the end of the book of Ecclesiastes, a book that is written towards the end of his life, he simply concludes with, "Fear God and keep his commandments." So here's a man who could have had everything he ever would have wanted, could have bought anything that he ever wanted to buy. And then he comes to the end of his life and says, this stuff didn't make me happy. I didn't find contentment in any of this stuff. And it really rings true in his life that money can't buy happiness. What about some other biblical examples? Where else in the Bible does God discuss contentment? One of the first places that I think of is 1 Timothy 6:6, where an older Paul, towards the end of his life, is instructing a young Timothy. He's instructing the young Timothy by saying, "But godliness with contentment is great gain." It doesn't matter how much money you have or how much wealth that you've accumulated or what kind of connections that you've made. Instead, Paul tells Timothy, "But godliness with contentment is great gain." Elsewhere in Scripture, Paul writes to the church of Philippi by saying, "Not that I speak in respect of want, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am therewith to be content." Where was Paul at when he was writing this letter? Do you remember? Paul was writing this letter from prison, wasn't he? And you got to think about, if anybody had a right to complain about discontentment, it would have been the Apostle Paul. He was shipwrecked, beaten. Some people even think that he was dead at one point and had come back to life. So if anybody had the right to complain about being discontent, it was the Apostle Paul, especially here in Philippians 4. But Paul concludes while in prison that no matter where he finds himself at, he says therewith to be content. Remember, Paul was a highly educated man. He could have went and worked in the religious sector and made plenty of money, but instead he went around, planted churches, encouraged churches, strengthened them, and became a tent maker in order to help churches out so that they didn't have to take care of him financially. So if anybody had the right to be discontent, it was probably the Apostle Paul, wasn't it? In fact, if you'll even remember in 2 Corinthians 12, Paul talks about this thorn in the flesh, whatever it might be. Some people claim it could have been his eyesight. Some people think it could have been something else. But regardless, God tells Paul in 2 Corinthians 12 that his grace is sufficient for thee, which is very similar to contentment. Elsewhere in Scripture, in the Old Testament, God instructs Joshua that no matter what happens when they go into the promised land, that he will be with him, and that he will not fail thee nor forsake thee, and to be strong and of a good courage, and neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee, whithersoever thou goest. With knowing the fact that God is going to be there to take care of us, regardless of what type of situation we find ourselves in, that's enough grounds to be content in and of itself. So those are some biblical examples. What about other examples? The Puritan Jeremiah Burroughs published a book entitled The Rare Jewel of Christian Contentment in 1648. It's a little drier of a read. In fact, you can go onto the Banner of Truth's website or Amazon to order this book. It's been updated so you can understand it a little better. But why does the author Jeremiah Burroughs consider contentment as a rare jewel? I mean, you don't just go out into a gravel pit and pick up a bunch of rocks and then find a whole bunch of jewels, do you? In fact, jewels are supposed to be rare and hard to find, aren't they? There's a reason that people hide their jewelry in a safe in order for robbers not to break into their house and be able to take them. Because jewels are precious and are something that are of great value. Well, Jeremiah Burroughs considers contentment a rare jewel, and it really is, isn't it? In the middle of the book, Burroughs expounds upon God's providence. God has promised to take care of our needs, hasn't he? He's promised to take care of our food, our shelter, and our raiment. Now, God has oftentimes gone above and beyond in meeting our needs, specifically these needs as well. I want you to think back to a time where you had a memorable meal. Maybe it was at a particular restaurant that you really enjoyed. Maybe it was a particular dish that you ate from that restaurant, or a dish that you made at home. Now, who gave you that food? Who allowed you to go to that restaurant? Think to the rainy days when you had a roof over your head. Think back to a time where God provided those things for you. Think about your favorite t-shirt or your favorite outfit that you've worn. Who allowed you to have those types of things? Was it you? Who allowed you to work a job so that you could use your money to buy those types of things? And who provided those things for you? Maybe you have a particular t-shirt or a particular pair of pants or an outfit that you really like. In the wintertime, I enjoy wearing sweaters. There have been multiple times that I have gone to put on a sweater on a cool day, only to find that the moths have beat me to that sweater. I've had several nice cashmere sweaters have been ruined by moths, leaving a hole in the sweater, and now the sweater is no longer wearable, unless you don't mind this big hole being obvious. You see, God provided those things for us, hasn't he? it's easy to look at different fashion magazines and maybe look on social media and see the types of outfits that people are wearing, and to become discontent with the clothes that you have bought from the Goodwill or from a thrift store. But we have to remember, who is it that provided those types of things? Burroughs continues in his book by saying, having discontentment in our lives, essentially what we are saying is that we know better than God, or that God's provisions aren't good enough for me. As we go back to the thought of who is it that provided our food, shelter, and raiment, and we become discontent with it, are we saying that we know better than God? If God promised that he would take care of our needs, and we are complaining about those needs that he has met by being discontent with them, essentially, aren't we saying that we know better than God, or that God's provisions that he's given us aren't good enough? But instead, Burroughs concludes by saying, being content with the things that God has given us, we come to give God the worship that is due him. Nobody would say that they know better than God, or at least a logical person wouldn't. But when we are discontent, aren't we essentially saying that what God has given us isn't good enough? And by being content, we're giving God the worship that is due, because we're agreeing with God that says, God, even though that I might not have everything that I would like to have, you have still met our needs in our food, shelter, and raiment, as many other needs as well. And I'm going to worship you regardless of what things you have chosen to give us. Remember back to Paul when he was in prison, and he said that he was content whatever state he was in. We should have that same type of attitude, shouldn't we? Oftentimes, being discontent makes excuses. Discontent makes excuses for why I'm unhappy with the things that I have. People will say that, if I just had a better job, if I paid more attention in school or got into a better school, then I could have made more money, and then I could have achieved more, and then I could have done this, that, or the other. But rather than being content with the job that you have, the place where you went to school, the money that you're making, and the things that you have achieved, again, I go back to the question, who gave you those abilities and those opportunities? Discontentment brings unhappiness in those types of areas, or it even blames your discontentment on other people. We'll say that if I hung around this person or that person, or you blame your discontentment on other people, saying that if this person didn't pass me up in a job for a promotion, I could have achieved more, could have gone on that vacation, or could have bought that nicer house or newer car. But instead of being content with the things that I have, we blame it off on other people. So the Christian has to ask this question, where am I looking for contentment? Am I looking unto God for contentment, in the things of God for contentment? Where am I searching for satisfaction? Am I looking for contentment in stuff, or in things, or in opportunities? Where am I looking for it? Or am I looking unto God for contentment? And reflecting on the things that he's given me, it might not be as good as what somebody else has. Am I still content for it? Do you consider yourself a content person? Or do you think of yourself as not a content person and compare yourself to other people and what other people have done? Or are you looking towards other things for contentment other than God? Have you ever heard the phrase, keeping up with the Joneses? Well, that term is from a comic strip from the early 1900s. It originated in the New York Globe and was first published in 1913 and quickly became popular. By September of 1915, a cartoon film of the same name was touring U.S. cinemas before movies were played. And in this comic strip, it was talking about people who were constantly comparing themselves to others because of what they were doing. They would increasingly buy nicer things and then so on and so forth, and they would call it keeping up with the Joneses. How many times have we found ourselves trying to keep up with the metaphorical Joneses? Seeing our neighbor's new car or the vacations that they've gone on and become discontent of where I am. So where are you finding contentment? Where are you looking for contentment? Are you remembering the things that God has done for you? We should be looking upward for contentment and not side to side. When we're looking side to side for contentment, we're often comparing ourselves with each other and not looking unto God for contentment. There's a reason that in Exodus chapter 20 that God said, "Thou shalt not covet." And what does God say about coveting in Exodus chapter 20? Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, or his wife, or his manservant, or his maidservant, or his ox, donkey, or anything that is thy neighbor's. In fact, instead, you should be looking at what God has done for you and the things that he has provided for you, and find contentment in those things and not what your neighbor is doing. So we should be looking upward for contentment and not side to side. If you found this podcast helpful, I hope that you will leave us a review and a comment on your favorite podcasting app. You can follow us on social media on Instagram at Sunday to Society, as well as like us on our Facebook page, which is also titled Sunday to Society. And with that being said, I hope you will check out our previous episodes. Have a great day, and God bless.